This is the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. I'm Dalton Gray.
And I'm Ryan Humphreys.
Broadcasting from our hometown of Fairbanks, Alaska. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, everybody. I'm Dalton.
I'm Mo.
And we're joined this week by our friend Steve from Hammer Bullets. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, guys. Good to see you.
It's good to have you on here. We've been well-intentioned to have you on here since we started the podcast. And, well, now's a good time. It's the middle of winter for us. It's been quite cold and inside temperatures anyway. It's nice to be inside recording podcasts. Mm-hmm. So we're excited to introduce you to some of our newer listeners, if folks don't know who Hammer Bullets are, and talk about some hunting stories. So how have you been lately?
Oh, been good. 2025 was an eventful year for me. I think I've told you some of it anyway. The very short version is I went in for a back surgery in April that turned into 3 and an infection. And so that kind of, everything was upside down for most of the year until about August. Yeah. And then we got to start hunting, and I was able to do it. So it was very rewarding personally because I was able to. And then the stuff that we did do was very cool.
Well, right on. Well, for some of our listeners that might not know anything about Hammer Bullets or the company or where you guys came from or what you do, maybe just give us like the 5-minute background synopsis version of what is Hammer Bullets and what you guys started from and where you are now and kind of where the things are going, and then we'll jump into some more details.
So I guess the short story is my partner Brian Holtmeyer and I, hunting partners, gun nuts, I guess bullet geeks. We were the weird guys that would go to the range and catch bullets in milk jugs to see what they do. And anyway, in our quest to find a better bullet, we decided that we could make it. We found copper and liked what it did better than lead as far as, performance on game and meat loss and all that kind of stuff. But everything we tried had an issue, so we decided to make it ourselves, not knowing that would be very difficult. But anyway, we bought a little lathe, put it in my garage, came up with a design, and we were able to get a patent on it, our radius drive band design. We call it the PDR drive bands. Patented that and designed some bullets and launched our website in 2015, and very slowly kind of grew. And I guess someplace around 2018 we started to get busy, and then about that point the company started to be able to support itself, and we moved into our shop that we're in now and all that stuff, and now it's, as an entrepreneur, it's always hard to say, but it's kind of like, it feels like we might have got our foot through the door in the industry, which is pretty cool. I look back at it now, and nobody told us in the beginning that really that's not possible. And I think ignorance is bliss, and we went ahead and kept pushing anyway, and we were able to do it.
And so for folks that might not know the difference between a copper bullet and a lead core bullet, now you had specifically mentioned like meat damage or performance on game, and you weren't totally satisfied with what you were seeing with other bullets. So you started out to make your own bullets. And so tell us just a little bit about how your design of bullets and from a terminal ballistics side your bullets differ from what you were shooting when you started the company back in 2015?
So, as a copper bullet goes, most of them are designed to be very high weight retention, 100% weight retention bullets. That's not what we wanted. We wanted to shed the nose of the bullet. We didn't want that rounded mushroom uh, uh, terminal performance uh, profile. We wanted that that shed, or that opening of the nose, the pedaling. We wanted that off, and to retain a flat, square fronted retained shank, um, that will displace soft tissue perpendicular to the direction that it's traveling, right? Versus the larger rounded mushroom can part its way through the soft tissue versus pushing it out perpendicular, actually makes a larger permanent wound channel than the rounded mushroom. And then later we learned that our shed weight, which is usually several pieces or a few pieces, has its own benefit. So we cultivated that a bit with how much of it we should shed, versus how much we should retain. And much of that shed weight will kind of track with that retained shank. Often we'll see that exit hole on the animal with, 3 or 4 little holes around it where those shed petals exited along with it. So the whole goal was to basically create the largest permanent wound channel we could all the way through the animal. So in the end, we kind of get the best of both worlds, and we get that opening and shedding of weight that creates that pop that the energy dump crowd always goes on. With the bullets that you guys chuckle, yeah, the bullets that kind of come undone. And in the right conditions and the right velocities, it's very effective. You get that big pop that's very stunning. So we get that big pop, but then we also get that great straight line penetration to keep that wound channel going all the way through. That's the goal. And the goal is to be able to keep enough of that straight line penetration, large wound channel for odd angles, bone impacts, not bone impacts, all of that kind of stuff. And, and then out of that, we get a very wide range of terminal performance velocity. For the most part, there's very little ceiling to how much is too high. And then we're good. We use 1,800 feet per second as our minimum, just across the board. Some of them go lower. We've just always felt like 18 is a good place to call it quits for good terminal performance and quick kills.
Very good. And so from the beginning with Hammer, you guys started out with 1 or 2 models of bullets?
Basically 2, the Hammer Hunters, and what was way back when we started was the Shock Hammer, which then became, let's see, now I'm having a hard time. That poor bullet's got its name changed 3 times. It's now the Stone Hammer. Each name that it had prior, we ran into a copyright issue and wound up having to change the name because we were stepping on somebody's copyright. Now we have Stone Hammer copyrighted. It's ours. We don't have to worry about it unless somebody else decides to try and use it. Yeah, it's Stone Hammer now. It was Shock Hammer before that. The Sledgehammer. That's what it was when we first started. Uh, Started with Sledgehammer, then Shock Hammer, and now it's a Stone Hammer. But those were the 2 basic lines that we started with. The Hammer Hunter, kind of the more pointy, sleeker looking bullet, designed with some BC in mind to reach a little farther. The Stone Hammer, larger open hollow point, blunt nosed, really not designed with any BC in mind, but designed for hard hitting, and a little more traditional in weight because they're longer bearing surface, you know, more closely to a flat base, shorter boat tail. Um, and so then they tend to line up with more traditional weights, but for that guy that's hunting, you know, 300 or 400 yards and in, they're pretty ideal.
And so the idea between having those two options is slightly more weight retention with one over the other, or just faster opening with one over the other. Just for the sake of clarification, like um, what would be the benefits of having the larger hollow point opening on the Stonehammer versus the smaller hole in the hollow point of the Hammer Hunter?
It was driven by probably two things. One, the copper bullets are difficult to get as much weight for the barrel twist as a lead core bullet because copper is 20% lighter by volume. So first thing people think is, well, why would I can't shoot that light? I need a heavier bullet. Well, with the Stonehammer, we can make them a bit heavier because it's a longer bearing surface, and a lot of people desire that heavier weight because they feel like, or they've been taught they need that heavier weight in order to function. So market demand, and then not as long in the nose, so maybe fit better in some cartridges. Although we've been pretty careful to make sure that we don't run into much trouble with that. But some of the Hammer Hunters are a little long in the nose to fit in some platforms, um, and the the two different styles of bullets. The heavier, higher weight retention, quicker opening Stonehammer. Um, they are all designed to do the same thing: open shed, flat front, retained shank. And there's different schools of thought of what is preferable. That heavier shank or uh, more shed weight. They're both very effective. Some guys like one better than the other. We have, I would say, a pretty high ideal of what we want a bullet to do, particularly in terminal performance. So we won't put one out that doesn't meet that criteria, but we also want to put bullets out that fit people's needs and what they want for a bullet, whether that be weight or weight retention and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so for a percentage number, what would you say is about average between the two bullets? Just for weight retention between the Stonehammer and the Hammer Hunter. Is there kind of an average percentage of weight retention there between the two?
Hammers are going to retain pretty close to 80%, where the Hammer Hunters are going to retain across the board closer to 70%. And I mean, we shed the nose of the bullet. Basically, we can control our weight retention on how deep we drill the hollow point. So it's not velocity dependent on how much weight it retains. They'll retain the same weight with high velocity impacts or low velocity impacts by how deep we put that. So basically, we put that hollow point pretty much to the shoulder or just before the actual shoulder. And so everything in front of that is what's going to open and shed. So the longer the nose of the bullet, the more weight it's going to shed from its total weight. But those are pretty good approximates, 80 and 70, maybe 65 to 70 in the Hammer Hunters.
And since then, in more recent years, I know a couple of years ago, you guys came out with the HHT bullet, and that was your first venture into the polymer tipped bullet range. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of where that came from, and what that bullet's purpose was, and specific features that may have improved that bullet design.
That one's kind of a funny story. we were long range guys before we ever started this. So, being able to shoot far was always a goal, but terminal performance was more important than anything, right? We couldn't market a high BC bullet or one that you could shoot far with just because you could and say, well, it almost works as good as our other stuff when it hits an animal. I think you should use it. And so that was, and so me in particular, were very vocal saying we would never have a tipped bullet. We tried several times to make a tip and marry it to a bullet, but every time we tried, it didn't work as well as we wanted it to, and so basically, my point was, the tip is a plug in the hole that is in the way of letting the bullet open from the inside out. So, every bullet is a hollow point of some sort. Whether it's a exposed lead tip bullet, open hollow point, or a tipped bullet, there's a hollow cavity. The exposed lead core, the lead is kind of the fluid. You need fluid to get in that hole, create pressure, and open the bullet from the inside out. When the old exposed lead tips, the lead is the fluid. It's already got fluid in it, and when you start squishing that lead, that causes it to open from the inside out. The open hollow point needs to accept fluid to get it to open properly. The tip bullet has a hollow point with a tip plugging the hole. And it's been marketed for years that the tip helps start expansion. Well, in all of our trials and tribulations, that wasn't true. The tip is a plug that needs to get out of the way. And so the trick was to be able to figure out a way to get that tip to get out of the way without stopping the expansion of the bullet. And we tried that several times and failed every time. And we finally said, yeah, no, we'll never have a tip bullet. We can't have it. And a buddy of ours was pushing us. He was pulling tips out of somebody else's bullet and drilling our holes in our bullets and stuffing them in and shooting them, going, look what I'm doing. And it's like, so we kind of set out to prove to him that it wouldn't work. And by golly, this time, the way we designed the bullet and the design of the tip and the way we married them together, we were able to get the tip to work as good or better than anything else we already had. So that was the point where we had to go, okay, well, I guess I have to eat a little crow now because we're going to go ahead and market a tip bullet. And then back in kind of in the beginning of that, we wound up sending you guys a rifle to help us test one of them. Up there, we were trying to make a heavy 7mm bullet, and well, here we live at 3 and shoot at 4,000 feet elevation. Well, and everything works great here, but we get them out there, and then guys that are at low altitude and getting cold temperatures, we're having stability issues. And these heavy bullets get long, and the longer they get for caliber, the more goofy they get about stability. Anyway, we sent you guys that rifle and several bullets to test at 0 degrees temperature at sea level, and you were able to make some of them not work and make one of them, the 170 grain HHT and the 7mm, our heaviest of the line. That one was successful at the 0 temperature, so that wound up being the one.
I don't think that Mo and I had ever seen a bullet hole in cardboard at 400 yards come through perfectly sideways with the profile of the bullet.
You hear about keyholing, but yeah.
That was a fun little project.
All of those bullets worked great here. We tested them here, shot them out to 900 yards with great success. All of them worked here, but I think one of them was 180 grain, and we marketed it for I don't know, about a month, and then started getting some stories from guys that, hey, I can't get this to shoot, and it's like, oh no, uh, and on paper with all of the Miller formulas and all that stuff, that bullet was fully stable in an 8 twist plus. But those formulas, the Miller formula, we figured out it's really kind of flawed. It wasn't designed for long for caliber bullets. Back when Miller made that formula, they just weren't doing that stuff. And the longer for caliber these bullets get, I think the more flawed the Miller formula gets, and it gets tough to figure it out. So then we find guys like you guys and send stuff to them and go, okay, see if it works.
But I mean, Steve, think of the energy transfer that you could impart on an animal with a sideways bullet.
Yeah, they hit hard. They don't penetrate very good, though.
We joke, and then so after the HHT, then more recently, you guys came out with what has been, if I'm not mistaken, your most recent introduction into your bullet lineup. So tell us what that is and the improvements on that bullet.
The Hammer HBC. So the Hammer HHT. HHT is a Hammer Hammer Hunter. The HHT Hammer Hunter tipped, and the HBC is the high BC. So for years we've had the naysayers out there saying, "Oh, Hammer bullets are great, but their BC sucks." Well, we're, like I said earlier, we were long range guys, so we've always kind of wanted to chase the BC thing, but we just couldn't do it at the detriment to terminal performance. Or the last thing we wanted, is we market to hand loaders, right? Which is a niche market. And then it would have been foolish to go into that niche market and market a really high BC bullet to a niche within the niche that would be a more difficult bullet to deal with, as far as fitment and perhaps tuning the loads and things like that. So we never dove into that really aggressively designed high BC bullet. Well, here, a year or so ago, Brian and I were talking. It's like, you know what? We've pretty well got our bases covered with the bullets that we've designed with, different factory offerings and twists and weights and all the stuff. We've pretty well covered it. So why don't we go make a high BC bullet and shut those guys up? It's like, okay, let's do it. We can make a high BC bullet, but it's going to come with high BC bullet issues. Long nose, short bearing surface, long boat tail. Might not fit in the magazine of your factory rifle. Make sure you got enough twist. It's going to need more twist for how long it is because there's, more slender nose, shorter bearing surface. It's lighter for its weight. Might be a little more finicky with the aggressive Secant ogive and short bearing surface. Not as much variability in seating depth because there's only 3 drive bends. We want to make sure there's 2 in the case neck. So there's just stuff about them that makes them possibly a little more difficult. But by golly, they're sexy and they're fun. They're cool. Still the same principle in how they operate with opening and shedding the nose and this flat retained shank. A little less weight retention because there's not as much there to retain. So they're more in the 60%, maybe 55% weight retention.
I suppose I skipped over one there in the middle, but how does the HBC compare to, say, the Absolute Hammer, which was the other bullet that Mo and I have no experience with personally, but always comes with the notation under one of the Absolute Hammers that this bullet flies extremely fast. Please load extremely carefully, not for beginner reloaders.
So the not for beginner loader thing is basically the way we designed that bullet. The ogive, or the nose of the bullet, never gets large enough to be touched by the rifling. So the only part of that bullet that is engaged in the rifling is the drive bands. And so that bullet was born of different reasons than it wound up getting marketed. We were we'd run into some issues, with tight bored guns engraving farther out on the ogive, making the BC of the bullet suffer. So us being the farm boys we are, it's like, well, why don't we design a bullet that the rifling can't touch the ogive, and that way it can't make the BC worse, right? So we did that, and knowing that the engraving pressure was going to go down, but had no idea how much the engraving pressure was going to go down and the resulting increased velocity capability. So by the way that bullet is designed, the BC is not as good as, say, the Hammer Hunters or the HHTs, because there's that little rise just before the first drive band where it engages, and that little rise tends to kind of be a bit of a dam. The smaller calibers doesn't it affect it as much, but get up to 30 cal and it affects it quite a bit. And that's kind of where we stopped developing that bullet, was at 30 cal, because the BC was suffering too much. But yeah, they wound up getting marketed because they have velocity potential and varies in different cartridges. But many of the older long skinny cartridges can see 200 plus more feet for that weight of bullet than you would normally see out of conventional bullets. So the HBC is similar to the Absolute Hammer in its low engraving pressure. We don't have we didn't design the ogive not to reach caliber. The ogive does, but it's an aggressive secant ogive, so not very much of the ogive ever engages. Just it's a shorter amount versus a tangent ogive. There's a fair amount of ogive that does touch the rifling, and our stone hammers and our hammer hunters, for the most part, are all tangent ogives. So the HHTs are all tangent ogives, other than one. We have an absolute, so an AHT, an absolute hunter tipped. We did one of those in a 6.5, but now that we've come out with the HBC, I think that one, I don't think we'll make any more of those. We wind up getting so many bullets because we keep coming up with these ideas, but the HBC, turns out we just did 3 drive bands and spaced them out far to make that bullet much more sleek in its profile, in order to try and increase BC, aggressive secant ogive. So there's only three small points on the bullet that actually engage the rifling. So the engraving pressure on the HBC is very low, very similar to the Absolute hammers. And so that warning of, you need to be comfortable and know what you're doing with loading, is only because they just don't line up well with conventional load data. They wind up wanting quite a bit more powder than you would think a bullet that weight should use, and faster powders than you think a bullet that weight would use in that given cartridge, in order to get to pressure, right? So it's so easy to push down the barrel. They need more or faster powder in order to create pressure. So you kind of have to go off into the loading, out into the weeds of the loading data to go find that pressure. And so it kind of depends on the size of the case and stuff, but usually you wind up using powders that are on the fastest side for that cartridge and bullet weight that leave the most amount of case space. And that way you can put more of that powder in and still have case space available for the powder to get it up to pressure. So that we talked earlier about, we range session that I was going to have today. We're going to go do it tomorrow, and we're working on validating data for the HBCs. So we're going to go shoot several rifles tomorrow and see if these numbers are working out.
And then you guys also have some non-expanding bullet options in your handgun bullet lineup, and then a few other non-expanding options for some of the rifle options as well that are called the fur hammers. Is that right?
The fur hammer is a very lightly marketed product. So basically, we've done that with the hammer hunters. So the guys that are out trying to, take animals and try to preserve pelts don't want big exit holes. So what we did is we shallowed the hollow point on the hammer hunter to just a very shallow hollow point, so it only opens a little bit. So you still get a little bit of opening, but not enough that it's going to make a big exit hole. So you're going to stay with more or less a caliber size exit hole. They're not as dramatic in killing, but they're definitely more kind to preserving that fur, the fur hammer. So we've never marketed it much. We get guys calling looking for that, and we'll go, hey, we have this design. You can order the bullet, put a note on the checkout page that you want it to be a fur hammer, and we'll make a short run of them for you with a shallow hollow point. And we first made them for our friends in Africa that were shooting the Tiny 10, the little bitty antelope, the little 20, 30 pounders, because most guys get those and they want to life size them, and it's tough on the taxidermist when there's a fist size hole out the other side. So that's when we first started doing it, and then wound up offering it to guys that are shooting coyotes or wolves or whatever. And it works well, but they don't kill as dramatically because there's just not that expansion. And the claw hammer and the jackhammer. The jackhammer is our pistol bullet design, and the claw hammer would be our 100% weight retention, dangerous game, solid, more or less non-expanding. They'll expand a little bit. Same with the pistol bullet. Both of them same kind of design. Very large me-plat, cupped nose, which that was my idea just because I didn't like the looks of a flat front. It just looked unfinished. So I said, well, let's just put a dish in the nose. It looks nice. Turns out that it aids in penetration and it aids in wound channel, increases the size of the wound channel with having that cup in there. Wish I'd have known. I could claim I knew that, but I didn't know that. I liked the way it looked better. But they're very effective. Especially the claw or the jackhammers for the pistols. They're a very effective low velocity design. The claw hammer, the dangerous game bullets, we've found over time that our stone hammers that shed the nose are actually more effective on the dangerous game type situation than the 100% weight retention non-expanding bullets. They'll out penetrate them because they shed a bit of the nose, right? So that nose on impact opens and sheds, which makes the retained shank shorter, which increases its stability and allows it to stay point on longer while it's penetrating than the longer bullet that doesn't shed any weight. So the lighter bullet winds up actually out penetrating the heavier bullet. Every bullet wants to upset at some point and it'll start to turn, right? The longer it is, the sooner it wants to upset and turn, and then penetration goes away. Where the stone hammer shedding some weight will out penetrate in most situations the 100% weight retention bullet.
So one of my favorite bullets that you guys make is the 120 lever hammer for the 30-30. Anything? I assume there's nothing special about the lever hammer other than the flat face on it.
So the lever hammer, it's a stone hammer, so it's a larger hollow point, right? And the lever hammer, the first one we designed was the 143 grain 30 cal for the 30-30, and we designed it with a 3 millimeter hollow point with a thicker me-plat around it. Flat, it's a little thicker, so there's more meat around the hollow point, so that it would have that flat surface that's large enough to ride on the outside ring of the primer in front of it in the tube magazine, so that we could avoid any of the primer detonation tube feed magazine theory that's out there. Everybody knows about it, and everybody's heard of somebody that got blown up by this, but nobody knows anybody that actually happened to.
Who had to be the test guinea pig to go out there with a 30-30 and torch off a few rounds for the first time?
Brian and I did it together, you know. Well, anyways, well, that brings up a whole other subject, you know. Here, I don't know, last winter, I guess it's probably been about a year ago, last spring sometime. Anyhow, we were designing another one of those bullets for a 25 cal, the lever hammer design, and it's like, I don't know about this whole primer ignition thing, you know, bullet point on a primer. So, excuse me, I decided to go see if I could get a pointy bullet to ignite another primer. So I fashioned up a jig and put a primed case in it, and then had a jig on top of it that I could put a bullet in, so that the point of the bullet's sitting right on the primer, so I could smack it with a hammer. And I posted all this online. Boy, you should have seen the people come unglued. And Steve's crazy. He's nuts. He's going to die. He's going to kill somebody. And it's like, dude, there's no powder in it. You know, but anyway, I could not ignite a primer. I tried. I smacking it with hammers. I dented primers. I beat them up. I could not ignite another primer. I'm not saying you should put pointy bullets in a tube fade magazine. Make that clear. I did not say that. But I just wanted to see if I could make it happen, and I couldn't do it.
Well, what I love about that lever hammer is the fact that I've got an 18-inch 30-30.
Yeah,
it's a JM stamp 336, and I've got that 120 going 2,800 feet per second, which for a 30-30 is just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran the 143 lever hammer in my 30-30 on one of our trips to Africa, and took a bunch of plains game with it, and that was super fun. I really enjoyed that, and it was after that trip we designed the 120. We didn't have the 120 at that time. I think I would have shot it instead and taken the higher velocity, but mine's a normal Marlin 336. I think they're 26-inch barrels, 24-inch barrels, something like that. And I can run the 143 at close to 2,600. You know, and so it's a very effective round out to, 150, 200 yards.
It might be a 20-inch barrel. I think it's a 20.
The 120 is running as fast as you're running them. Really is probably effective just about as far. Because you've got a pretty good velocity advantage. And really the open sight 30-30, who wants to shoot it farther than 150 yards anyway?
Well, I've tried a few times, and it's always it's always low light, or the target. The animal's the same color as the background, and at like 200 yards, and I gave up, put the 30-30 back in the cabin, and grabbed a 300 short mag with a scope.
You just couldn't make it out. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point I've got to start putting animals on the ground.
Right next to the cabin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Hunt off the porch. That's our motto up here. If you have a cabin, it's also a blind.
Yep.
You get much farther than that from the cabin, you guys are going to freeze to death.
Yeah, especially in these temperatures.
December of 2025.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the coldest you've ever had.
45 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we're probably the warmest we've had in that long.
I saw something the other day or this morning said the Western United States, I think it's the warmest on record.
Wow.
Warmest December on record. Yeah.
We've November seemed like winter. It seemed, winter kind of came early, and December came and all the snow is gone. It's very mild out. It was snowing a little bit earlier, but I don't know. It'll probably rain tomorrow.
About the gratification for us younger generation of Alaskans that live here in Fairbanks to be able to say we did live through a real Alaskan winter, because all of our parents and grandparents and even great grandparents have told us all growing up that well, you guys don't really know what winter is, and I remember winters where it was 40 below for 3 weeks straight, and ice fog covering the whole town for weeks on end. And well, now we've lived it, Grandma.
Yep.
So it's kind of a badge of honor, and our vehicles are slightly worse for wear, and there's power steering fluid littering our roadways, but
That's tough. That's cold. That's really tough. The last 2 winters here, we got sub 30 below, which I'd never seen that though my whole life growing up in Montana. Um, not at least here in Western Montana. We always saw 20 below, 25 below, but never saw the 3. And the last 2 winters, we had a week where we were 30 plus below. That's cold.
What I'm fairly certain was below -50 at my house. The closest weather station said -49, but the temperature at my house was colder. You can tell.
The doors fell off your truck.
Well, the door on my wife's car wouldn't latch when I tried to close it. It just kept bouncing open. And then my brand new fuel transfer pump where I was trying to put heating oil in my house quit. Brand new, Yeah, just quit. So I have an old hand pump that I got out and stuck in the fill spout and sat out there, 50 below doing this number. It's about 400. I think it's about 400 or 500 cranks, full up and down rotations to get 400 or 500 to fit to do 100 gallons.
Wow.
Oh, it was great fun.
Kept you warm too.
Well, I've done it every winter for several years now, and I finally decided this year in like October I'm buying a nice pump. $1,000, high Arctic grade, all the high end stuff, so I won't ever have to worry about it. It failed.
It works great until it gets cold.
Well, yeah.
It'll be great in the summertime though.
Well, if I get it, it has a warranty.
Oh, nice.
But a lot of good that did me at the time.
Yeah, you got to call a call center in Dubai to get through the warranty.
Yeah, I don't know.
Though.
I haven't even tried yet. I need to contact them. But
well, Steve, I was just going to say now that we've kind of covered all of the models and products that you guys make over there at Hammer Bullets, this podcast usually goes the route of storytelling, and you had alluded to a few stories that I actually stopped you when you and I were on the phone a few weeks ago. I said, no, don't spoil it. I want you to tell us on the podcast. So this has to do with a relatively recent trip that you and your guys went on. So tell us about that and what you guys were up to.
I needed to get a drink of water. Um, so the big, we went to Africa August and September. Brian and I split up, went on two different trips. So this trip was a trip to go hunt elephant. Um, our friends in Africa have been telling us for a couple of years, you've got to come do this. It's like old Africa, and it's kind of more like how you hunt in Montana. We don't. There's very little roads, so you've got to do a lot of walking and hiking and well, neither Brian and I really ever had a burning desire to kill an elephant. Uh, and I'd rather, in my mind, I just wanted to go see one. But it's like, okay, well, and to back up for a second, Botswana's got too many elephants. They have an overpopulation of elephants. Everybody in the States has been told that there's hardly any left. And
Like us with polar bears.
same thing. Anybody that shoots an elephant is killing one of the last ones left. And that's what you guys get with the polar bears. There's no polar bears left, and some guy went and shot the last one. Um, anyhow, I don't want to get too deep into that, but anyway, so I went to do the elephant hunt. Unlike a lot of the stuff we've gone to do, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go see what this is like. And I can say after it's all done now, I want to do it again. I was going to do this one time, a once in a lifetime thing. I'm going to go do it, and you know, but man, I tell you what, the experience in total, not just the hunting of the elephant, but just all of it. Getting there to Botswana, that was kind of an adventure. It starts getting a little remote on the roads and the border crossings and that kind of stuff, and shoot, a few hundred miles on dirt roads uh, to get to the concession, which from there, was like a 4 hour drive on rough dirt roads to get to where we were hunting elephant. Uh, and then, you know, whatever they called roads there, they were, 2-track trails that were rough and tight and, you know, the, the remoteness, and the native villages and the people that we would encounter that basically live out in the bush that are tending cattle and things like that. All of it all together was quite incredible, really. And then you get the elephant, and I knew, there would be lots of people coming when they hear about an elephant so that they could get meat. Um, and the we'll back up for a second. We'll go, so the hunting part of it, that was pretty cool. You find an elephant track, you got the trackers looking at it, and deciding if it's an elephant we want to hunt or not, and basically then you basically hike the track to see if you can catch up with the elephant and see it. Uh, and and often they give you the slip, they disappear, we can't find them, so we hike back out and go look some more. Uh,
You can't find something the size of a Volkswagen bus.
isn't that crazy? Um, and or they move out of the area. I mean, they can cover ground quickly. They move off. It's like, oh, well, we're farther away from him than we were when we started.
Yeah. Was there a lot of tall trees and thick brush there where you were, I assume?
Yeah, it was quite thick. The trees there aren't tall like our timber here, or like your timber, with the pine trees that are 60, 80 foot tall. The stuff there is probably 20 feet tall, with some stuff that's taller, but most of it's not that tall. um, but anyway, when I got my elephant, it was in a herd of 200 plus. Uh, there was this huge herd of elephants, which they really don't like hunting out of a herd like that because it's full of cows and calves, and the cows aggressively defend calves just like moose. And like they told us, you can't run from them because they can run fast. You can't climb a tree because they tear the tree down. And if you try to go into a warthog hole, they'll pull you out. Uh, so if you wind up in an encounter with a mad elephant, you probably wind up having to shoot it. So that's not something they want to do. So and it's dangerous and all that stuff, you know. So hunting an elephant out of a large herd isn't usually their first choice. They really rather find a few elephants. But we found this big herd, 200 plus elephant, and I tell you what, it was like a logging operation going on without the sound of equipment. There was trees just being torn down all over the place. So you just hear one tree falling after another. And that herd of elephants is just working its way through the timber, tearing down the trees. They don't reach up in the tree and take a branch out and eat it. They tear down the tree and they'll eat some of it. They'll eat some of it or maybe none of it and move on to the next tree and tear it down. Um, it was and they leave just a swath that looks like a tornado went through it. It was incredible. Um, and so we went sneaking, and their hunting party. It's not just two or three guys, like a dozen guys in the hunting party, and the main PH is like, okay, everybody needs to be quiet now. There's a dozen guys. We're trying to sneak up on an elephant. Uh, so you got PHs that are armed that are watching the sides in case something comes from the sides. And you've got a game warden there that's documenting to make sure that everything's done properly and fair chase, and that if a mistake happens and an elephant gets wounded, that he's there documenting, saying that it was or wasn't done because of a careless action of a hunter. Um, so you've got that, and you have a local professional hunter that's from the local area that by regulation you have to hire one of them. Um, so anyway, there's and then trackers, all that stuff. So yeah, there's nearly a dozen people in the hunting party, and everybody's sneaking along through the bushes. So we're sneaking along, and all of a sudden it gets kind of loud, and Hugh, our main PH, he stops and he's like, "Uh-oh, we need to get out of here." We turn around, we start heading back, and then he stops and he's like, "No, we don't. We're fine. We have the wind. We have everything." What it was is there were just so many elephants that when that many elephants would move together, it sounded like they were stampeding, but they weren't. They were just moving. There was just so many of them.
Oh,
So then we turned around, we went back in, and pretty soon we're sneaking in, and there was a bull to the left that I just barely caught a glimpse of it, but we were looking at one in front of us, and it was interesting. We got close, and somebody's in my ear going, "Hey, he's right there," and I'm looking, and I'm not seeing it until I looked bigger, and it's like I was looking, and all I was seeing was the brush and the gray until I looked bigger, and then I saw the profile of the elephant. He's huge. Yeah, I I wasn't prepared to see something that big until I finally saw the outline of him, and it's like, holy crap, he's right there. Uh, he was close, and I went up, on the sticks and got a hole through the brush and behind the shoulder, boom, uh, and he goes and he turns and he's down pretty quick. He only went maybe 50 yards, um, and just a broadside heart shot. I was shooting a 500 Jeffrey with our 450 grain Stonehammer, Um, and yeah, and then you get to the elephant, and he's down, but they're very large. It takes a long time for an animal that big to bleed all the way out, right? You guys are familiar with large animals with moose. They take longer to bleed out than a deer, before they run out of blood. Well, this thing's 2.5 tons, or 5 tons. What was it? 5 tons, I think the thing weighed. Um, they're just massive, And so anyway, we get there, and Hugh says he's dead. You can just let him go, or you can put one in the back of his head and make it all stop now. And so we put a finisher in the back of his head, and it's all done. Uh, but at that point, he was basically unconscious. He's just still kind of breathing. Yeah, yeah, and so then we did the field pictures, and the high fives and the back slaps, and the traditional cutting of the tail, which I didn't know anything about that. I think so. What it is, if you find a dead elephant and the tail is missing, that means somebody owns that elephant, and you're not allowed to touch it. Uh, and I assume it probably comes from the old ivory trade days where people would have the tail to prove that that was their elephant. Uh, so anyway, you cut the tail off, and you keep the tail. So we did that and took the picture.
Probably do that with white-tailed deer in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, everybody fights over them. Uh, so we go back to the trucks, and we, celebrating, and everybody's having a beer and doing all that kind of stuff, and jump in the trucks, and we're going to make the 3 or 4 hour drive back to the lodge, and it's getting near dark now. It's the sun's starting to go down, and the truck in front of us is, I don't know, a couple hundred yards out in front of us. We just took off, and they took off a little ahead of us. All of a sudden, that truck stops, and David, that's with us, he's the other hunter in my group. So there was two of us that were hunting. Uh, and I said, "Hey, David, I'm pretty sure they found another elephant. You ready?" I was joking. Turns out there was a bull that had stayed behind. That whole herd took off when I shot mine, and there was a bull that stayed behind. And those guys are like, "Come on, come on!" Anyway, David jumps out, and everybody goes down there, and David winds up shooting that bull. And so we had two bulls down about 300 yards apart uh, that evening.
Is he shooting the same rifle?
He was shooting, a 416 Ruger, I think. Um, he's shooting a 416. I don't remember which cartridge now. And he was shooting our 400 grain Stonehammer. Um, and anyhow, that elephant charged. Um, so he wound up getting shot a few times. Um, but he was in must. So I don't, if you don't know what that is, the elephants come into must, and that's when the males, it's like our deer and elk and stuff come into rut. Uh, but the must isn't seasonal. Uh, it can happen anytime, I guess. Um, so only bulls that are in must will breed. So bulls that aren't in must don't breed, and the cows, they're cycling not on a regular basis like our herd animals come in. They all come in to cycle at the same time. The elephants are coming in and out all the time, uh, and so they don't have a calving season. Um, but only bulls that are in must breed. So there might be a more dominant bull that isn't in must, and a lesser bull that is in must. The dominant bull will step aside, and the bull that's in must breeds. Um, but when they're in the must, they're more aggressive, uh, and so anyway, they snuck in on that elephant and shot, and I think that first shot was probably a fatal shot, but that elephant then turned and thought, "All right, I'm going to fight you," uh, and then charged, and he got shot a few times to stop the charge.
Happen to recall. No, I was sorry to interrupt you there. I was just going to ask, do you happen to recall if that 416 round made it through to the other side, or if it exited or stuck inside somewhere? Do not roll it over in the dark and take a look at it.
That bull, I didn't spend a lot of time around it because I spent all the time with mine that was on the ground the next day when all the people came and whatnot. Um, I don't remember if they recovered a bullet out of that elephant or not. We didn't recover any out of mine, and I don't know if mine passed through. It's pretty much chaos when the people get permission to get to the animal. And so trying to recover stuff like that or study wound channels and stuff is very difficult. There was 200 plus people that showed up to get elephant meat. It was an incredible experience. And so you remember, nobody has permission to touch the elephant that hasn't been given permission to touch the elephant, right? So we got back there the next morning, and there was native people already there that were chopping trees and clearing roads to get to the elephant before we had gotten back. So the word gets out that these elephants are down, and then the people just start coming. And they're coming on foot and bicycles and donkey carts and cars and farm trucks. They're just coming, and everybody's got a knife or an axe and a gunny sack or a 5-gallon bucket uh, to get meat. And so we get there, and they're clearing the stuff up, and so then, we did the official pictures, where they, clean the tusks and prop the head up and do all the posed pictures from the hunt. Uh, and and while we're doing this, there's more and more people gathering around, and I knew there was lots coming, but I had no idea. At this point, I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of people here. And so we were finished taking the picture and said, hey, wait a minute, I would like to get a picture with all of the people that are here with my elephant. So I had everybody gather around and we posed and we took a picture. It was pretty cool. Um, and the people are friendly, and some of them speak some English, some of them don't. So I'd talk with as many of them as I could, and so then they start preparing the animal. So they're taking off the parts of the animal to get the trophy items, like the tusks, and I wanted an ear. I wanted the left ear from the elephant. So the left ear, the way it's shaped is naturally shaped like Africa on the left ear. So I wanted the left ear so I can hang that left ear on the wall. I wanted a couple molars.
Yeah.
I was fishing with no, they're not that big. They're, like that. They're probably 3 inches long, inch and a half wide, are the molars. And that's something I learned. Interesting. The elephant has um, a finite supply of teeth, kind of like us. We got two sets. The elephant has, I'm not sure how many sets, but they have teeth, but their teeth grow on a conveyor from the back to the front. So their teeth are moving forward all the time, and as they wear out, they fall out the front. And so they've always got new teeth coming in the back, replacing the old teeth that are falling out the front. Um, and then eventually,
Hunters in the States.
crazy animals, and the tusk, I had no idea, but the tusk that's sticking out of the head, there's about that much tusk in the head. So that tusk runs up in their head and it goes behind the eye. Their eye is wired around the tusk because that tusk is, that big around, and it's behind the eye. So the wiring for the eye goes around the tusk, uh, and the skin on their head that's around the tusk is kind of loose around the tusk, and it goes back up in there, and it is packed full of dirt and mud and grass and twigs, and I don't know how they survive but there's all kinds of gook packed up in that skin around the tusk up in there. Uh, and so these guys are on there and they're cutting the head off and they're doing all that stuff, and pretty some guy comes over to me and he's got a worm in his palm of his hand. He's got this worm that's wiggling around in his hand. Came out of the head of the elephant. Uh, Something that was living up in its sinus cavities. This worm, so they've got stuff like that living in there. I don't. It's simply amazing. Uh, so anyway, once all the parts of the animal that are wanted to be kept are off, then the people are given permission to get to the animal. And man, before that happened, there was a man showed up, and he stood up on the back of the elephant, and he had a button shirt and slacks and shoes, and he looked more important, right, than most of the people there. And so he gives a speech to all the people, and everybody's quiet and they're all listening and they're all agreeing and nodding and yeah, mm-hmm. And he gets done with the speech, and I went over to him. I said, "What did you tell them?" And he says, "Well, he was such and such a health minister for the area, and he was just telling them that everybody needs to be courteous and orderly and careful. We don't want anybody to get injured and all of this kind of stuff." And everybody's wholly agreeing with him. And then when they're given permission, boom, they just they just dive in. There's elbows flying and knives all over the place, and there is nothing orderly about it. It's coming off in handfuls. I mean, it's grab a piece of meat and start cutting, and there's somebody cutting next to your hand trying to get a piece of meat, and people are grabbing pieces of meat and handing them out to somebody to put in a bag. And pretty soon, axes are coming down, chopping ribs, and people are cutting. Axes are flying right next to people's heads. Uh, it was it was a it was a spectacle. I've got pictures of it. There's all these people, and you can't even see an elephant in the middle. And I was thinking that they would work the top down, and then we would roll this thing over and do the other side. No, no, it was top down, and there's people down on their hands and knees working on the bottom up, and this elephant just gets disintegrated down to nothing. And when they're done, all that's left there is the stomach and intestinal contents. Everything's gone. They take the bones, they bust the bones and get the marrow out.
Wow.
And I didn't see this, but I heard that often they'll take the blood soaked dirt, they'll take that and they'll put it in their gardens. Um, so really, the only thing left from that elephant would be its stomach contents, and everything else is gone. It was, and these people don't have refrigeration or anything, so they make jerky out of it. It gets salted and dried, and and they'll eat it like that, or they'll rehydrate it in a pot with food, when they're cooking. And but talking with the people, they were very excited about the elephant. They're like, "Oh, this is better than beef." Um, and so, of course, I had to get a piece of elephant. There's no way I'm going to kill an elephant and not try it, right? So we got a nice piece of backstrap and took that back to the lodge and trimmed it all up nice and marinated it a little bit and barbecued it. And I can say elephant tastes quite nice, but it's tough. Um, the grain in the meat is very big. And so I think because the grain is so big that the there's kind of a membrane through between grains, and I think that's what kind of made it tough. Um, but it did taste pretty good. It was a nice tasting meat, but it was tough. It was tough to chew.
I mean, I've heard of having a hunting party of friends show up to help you butcher a big animal like a moose or something like that, but 200 people. I mean, I don't know if I quite want that many.
It was crazy, and I'm just walking around, just trying to experience it, and be there. And I walked by this lady, and she's kind of standing on the outside, and I said, "How are you doing?" And she says, "Not very good." I said, "Oh, why?" And she does this like, "Look." Free for all that's going on. And I asked her, I said, "Well, are you not getting any meat?" And she says, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, if I can get the heart for you, do you want it?" And she says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, I've got orders for these guys to get the heart out of the elephant before anybody cuts it all up." And I said, if they can get it out of there, I said, "You can have it. I'll give it to you." Because I shot this bull and I shot him in the heart. So we were hoping maybe we might find the bullet in the heart. Heart, the heart's like this big. It's it takes like three guys to carry the heart. The the heart comes out and we get it off to the side. There's a nice big hole in the heart where my bullet went in, and I've got a picture of a guy's arm up to his shoulder in the hole in the heart, searching for a bullet. Well, the bullet went all the way through the heart, so there was no bullet there, but it went all the way through. And anyway, I was able to get half of that heart and give it to her. Uh, and so she was pretty happy, but she hung around longer later when less people were there. And then she was back in there and she was getting some meat. But she did get that heart, which was cool.
So did that same group of a couple hundred people do both elephants, or was there an equally large group of people at the other elephant?
Probably equally large. I don't know for sure exactly how many, and they were going back and forth between elephants. Um, they're about 300 yards apart. And we left my elephant and went over to the other one for a while before we actually left. But when they were in the morning, when they were first gathering and the crowd's getting really big at my elephant, I started telling people, I said, there's another elephant. And they're like, "Really?" "Yeah, about 300 yards that way." And they'd go, "Thank you." And they'd grab their stuff and head over there. And so, yeah, so I never really saw anybody that got hurt. I did see one guy that had a gash in his forehead. I heard that maybe he might have got hit with an axe. Um, but yeah, and I've heard stories. A friend of ours, when he went and shot his elephant, they're all in there cutting and butchering, and some guy's swinging the axe, cutting ribs, and this guy gets hit and loses these three fingers from an axe. So the index finger stays and cuts the other ones off on an angle, and he shakes his hand and goes back to cutting meat.
Wow. Well, don't worry about it. Somebody will eat them.
Yeah, and these people are in it. I mean, some of these people were in to their shoulders inside the elephant getting meat. It was, and there's a pile of flip flops on the ground. These people kicked off their flip flops and they just get in the elephant. Uh, yeah.
Oh, well, I hope you did take plenty of pictures because I'm going to request that you send us a few of those. That sounds hilarious.
A bunch. I'll send you some pictures. Um, it was an experience that, like I said, I didn't think I'd want to do it again, and I don't know if I will do it again, but I would like to do it again. Uh, and so if anybody that's going to watch this is interested, elephant hunting is relatively inexpensive now because they have too many elephants. It's a third of the price of what it used to be. I just saw the new price list from Trophy Game Safari. I think the management bull hunt is 25,000. It's less than I can go up to Alaska and go on a guided moose hunt.
Moose and brown bear and sheep.
Yeah.
I want to go to Alaska and go moose hunting in the worst way. And every year, I think it goes up $5,000.
It's pretty close to that rate.
I didn't know a moose was that much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow.
Guided moose hunt is $30,000 plus. And you can go to Africa and eat 5-course meals every night and get treated like a king and hunt elephant.
And so you said that both of those elephants, you and your buddy shot those both with the stone hammers. Is that right? Okay, right on.
And there was 2 other guys hunting. They were in another group hunting, I don't know, like 25 miles away from us. And they both got their bulls. They both were shooting 416 Rigby or Ruger, 416 Ruger, 416 Rigby. I think those were the other cartridges. And those other ones were also shooting the 400 grain stone hammers. And so we had 4 hunters all in the same group, so to speak. And we got 4 elephants in 3 days.
Wow.
So they said that was a record that they don't think they'll break again. It's pretty rare they have 4 guys hunting elephant at the same time. So that doesn't happen very often. Usually it's 1 or 2 people that are there hunting elephant. Well, we happen to have 4, and so two parties. The first day we didn't get any elephant. The second day, David and I shot ours, and one of the guys in the other group shot theirs. And then the third day, the last guy shot his. And they also were running into herds of 100 to 200 head of elephants.
That's a lot.
And the area where we were hunting, they hadn't killed an elephant there for a couple of years. Yeah. The area in itself is huge. So right there in that local area, with where the 2 tribes that were near, the 2 villages that were near where we shot ours, they hadn't had an elephant down in that area for a couple of years. So it'd been a couple of years since they'd been able to go get meat from an elephant.
That area have a lot of the other antelope and plains game species that other parts of Africa does as well?
Not as much because it's not as well regulated. So there's a lot of people running dogs that are shooting everything the dogs can get a hold of. That makes sense. So the local people, they have dogs and they use the dogs for hunting, and the dogs hunt whatever animal they can find, and they kill them. so not as much. There's leopards there, so there's elephant leopard packages, and so obviously there's animals there. There wouldn't be leopards if there wasn't animals, but it's we saw some kudu, couple kudu, but it's not like going to South Africa and you've got the abundance of game. Uh, it's much more slim pickings. If you're going to go plains game hunting there, um, there's opportunity to plains game hunt while you're there. But when we were done with the elephant, we went back to South Africa and then we went and did some plains game hunting there.
Very cool. Well, I'd kind of like to switch gears a little bit here and take a few minutes to talk about another subject matter, if you're good with that. So, over the last probably a couple years now, I think at this matter of fact, you and I were at deer camp about a year and a half ago when some of this initial stir was going on about this topic.
2 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Now that it's 2026,
Yeah.
I guess officially it's been 2 calendar years, but the topic was really kind of gaining traction in the hunting industry of smaller cartridges
Oh yes.
for big game hunting. And I have no doubt in my mind that you, being who you are in the industry and making projectiles, you have seen the results in that through purchasers, and you can kind of see the trend even within your own consumers, and if that is translated or not. The argument has come through many different voices that a smaller caliber, or in some cases that goes with a smaller cartridge, shooting a highly disruptive bullet, if you will, is as effective as a larger caliber round going out of a larger cartridge, shooting a heavier recoiling cartridge as well. So people have advocated for shooting lighter rounds, less recoil, more shootable, more affordable to shoot, easier to practice with and get better with, but shooting a higher disruptive round or bullet in this case. And so there has, by consequence, been kind of an attraction to the copper bullet world. And there are other companies that make a bullet. I don't want to say similar to what you guys make there at Hammer, but similar in some ways. And some of them have been out for a little while. Some of them are relatively new. And I have seen a lot of people that I never saw really talk about copper bullets much at all, that they had always shot match bullets or something else of that softer, more traditional lead cup and core design, but in different packages, higher or lower ballistic coefficient. But there has been kind of a draw to some copper projectiles because of this newer design concept, which, again, by relativity, the idea of a highly disruptive, frangible, if you will, copper bullet didn't really exist until the last handful of years on a large scale. So if you would, kind of explain what your thoughts are on that. I know Mo and I have our opinions. I'm always curious to hear somebody else's take on the matter and what your 2 cents are of this push, if you will.
So I might be kind of guilty of this. For years we've kind of beat the drum of, shooting stuff that might be traditionally smaller or lighter than what is normal in order to kind of prove a point that, hey, look, these hammers are quite effective, even when, shooting something lighter, smaller, faster than is traditional. So we've done a lot of that, and so I will say that the old saying, I don't think you can bring too big of a gun, but I do think you can bring one that's not big enough. So I think there's a lot of truth in that, and we've done some hunting with stuff that I think is too small, and it's not what I would advocate or what I would really reach for if I wasn't trying to prove a point. Uh, so um, but I don't necessarily live in the world that you can't kill an elk unless your cartridge starts with a 3, right? And there's a lot of people out there that elk guns start with 3, and the better elk guns start with more than 1 3. Uh, and I don't have a problem with a guy that wants to use a large caliber, bigger gun. It's great. You know, does that mean you can't kill an elk nicely with a 22 caliber center fire rifle? It doesn't mean that, but I think there's less room for error and more room for things to go wrong when you start going on that really small end. Uh, we make that bullet that is frangible but still retains weight so that we still get good penetration. And I'll tell you what, the 22 cals are impressively good at killing. Uh, it's amazing the amount of wound that we can create with a small caliber bullet. Um, and in that equation, there's is speed and all of that stuff. So there's velocity that the projectile is going through there. I've seen the stuff out there that 22 cal, whatever, shooting these match bullets kills everything like lightning. And man, I think that's a recipe for disaster. These bullets that don't have integrity to penetrate deeply, if you don't hit the right spot, then things are going to go really wrong. And I think we owe it to the animals to be more conscious of that. You put a 22 long rifle behind the shoulder in the pocket, and you're going to kill the animal. It's going to work. A 22 long rifle between the eyes is probably more effective than maybe even a 30-30 between the eyes, because the 22 cal has very small frontal area, and it will penetrate through the skull and get in there, where you get these big frontal area bullets that are going slow, and that's when they bounce off the head of grizzly bears. So I'm probably kind of in the middle of the whole thing. I do think that there's extremes on both ends, and the best place is probably more in the middle. I think a lot of guys grab guns that have so much recoil they're afraid of them, and they couldn't hit their ass with both hands. Uh, you know, because they flinch. And that guy would be so much better off if he'd just shoot, uh, a 270 or something like that. That doesn't beat him up, and he can actually stay in the scope and shoot it. So I'm not sure what else to add to it other than I guess with us and what we market and what we sell, the stuff that we call big game hunting bullets are big game hunting bullets, even if they are 22 caliber. Is it what I say? If you're going to go brown bear, moose, elk hunting, I don't think that's what I'm going to grab. I think it should be a little bigger, in my personal opinion, um, and that's what drives a lot of this stuff is personal opinions, which you can have a whole room of different personal opinions, and really maybe nobody's wrong. Uh, you know, um, so I think a guy should be careful about what he chooses. I think um, I think there's such thing as too small.
I think I agree with that. That's a pretty balanced perspective on the subject. It's definitely not something that Mo and I have really gotten into on a personal level.
Yeah.
Yet, we have some friends. As a matter of fact, just a couple episodes ago, we had a friend of ours on the podcast here from town, and he's building a 22, even probably as we speak.
Yeah. Well, I think he's still waiting on some of the parts for it, but
yeah,
it's 22 ARC, right? And he's building.
I believe it's the ARC. Yeah.
Well, and I'm getting into the AR world.
Yeah.
And more and more. And I've got a 6 ARC. I'm building a 338 ARC, and I think a 22 ARC is going to be next.
Yeah.
And just to shoot stuff with it, like just because it's easy to shoot something with even a 30-30.
Mm-hmm.
It takes more time, more effort. Like you say, put it in the right spot.
Yeah. But
and there's a limit to range. We've spent a lot of time making 22 cal bullets. Trying to extend the range because guys want to shoot farther with their 22s. But we also designed a big 22. It's a 300 WSM neck down to 22 improved. And we run 70 grain bullets well over 4,000 feet per second. And there's not too many things with legs that can survive that. It's quite impressive. But you're 5.56 running 50 grain projectiles that are frangible probably isn't a great idea.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I said a long time ago on the podcast that I don't think I'd ever hunt with a match bullet. Why would I?
Yeah. Yeah.
When things go right, but there's not as much room for error.
I mean, there are certainly a lot of opinions about the match bullet conversation. I think that is a conversation that will probably never die.
Yeah.
And there's probably enough guys out there that have honestly shot stuff with them that get honest results, and they may never have that happen.
I know there are.
Yeah.
I know people that have done it.
Yep.
But
exactly.
I know them too. I get to hear the bad stuff all the time because people call me because they had something go wrong and they're looking for a solution.
Right. Exactly.
I get to hear a lot of very negative stories. And I, over the years I've gathered, that there's a window of lower velocity and upper velocity. And if you're inside that window, and it's not a real big window, but if you're inside that window, results are quite dramatic and they work really well. But if you go higher velocity than that window or lower velocity, all bets are off.
Interesting. But just kind of to piggyback off of that subject, there are a seemingly growing number of shooters that are still shooting, let's just call them, just for the sake of it, smaller cartridges and calibers that are not shooting lead core match bullets now. They're shooting more frangible all copper bullets, whether that's made by Hammer or some other manufacturer that has kind of a version of that type of copper bullet. And the idea still remains that while you do get that more explosive terminal performance, you still retain a bit of that straight line, deep penetration characteristic of a more traditional, older design copper bullet that is designed to retain over 98% of its weight and continue all the way through. But that often, if not always, results in a smaller wound channel than one of these newer copper bullet designs does. And so seeing that blend of the two, kind of that smaller caliber migration of a lot of shooters and hunters, and also marrying that up with the idea of this newer copper bullet design. Again, manufacturer out of the question. That is interesting to see, and the results are still catastrophic.
Mhm.
Last year, well, I guess again 2 years ago, this would have been winter of 24 at deer camp. Mariah shot a handful of blacktails with his 6 ARC.
Mhm.
With what weight bullet was that?
That's the 88 grain Hammer Hunter.
Yeah, and it's not explosively fast velocity.
No, I think I'm doing 27.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely flattening those deer. Now, they're not a big bodied animal, but what is the most commonly shot animal in North America? It's not moose, it's not grizzly bears, it's deer. And that is by quantity probably what we've killed more of in the last handful of years than
absolutely,
anything
yeah.
else combined, really. We tend to kill a lot of deer. Now, we didn't make it in 25, but well, we are coming back with revenge on our blood in 2026. We had some things come up, but just trying to find the right blend of shootability and the right rifle setup. And now Mariah's getting into this 338 ARC build where he wants to suppress it, and he's going to try to go subsonic with it.
Mhm.
So we're also trying to think about meat damage. The last deer that I shot in 24, I shot with a 7 mag with that 145 HHT, and that was a blistering result of death. I think that deer was dead before its chin hit the ground. But again, while velocity and that power, if you will, is nice in the event that I wanted to shoot a brown bear if I came across it, which I would not hesitate to with that round, it's not really what I need for deer hunting. I think that's what more and more people are getting to the idea of is, hey, you know what? How about I stop picking a cartridge and hunting rifle based off of a what if? And how about I just pick a good round? And if I run into a bear, then so what? Odds are, if I hit the thing anywhere in the body anyway, even with a 22 ARC, it's probably going to divert it.
Yeah.
Odds are pretty high that you will at least divert the charge. And so people are coming away from that idea. And I've been guilty of that way of thinking myself.
That's why you carried a 7 mag, right?
Well, part of it, yeah.
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why you
for
carried
years.
Yeah.
For
Well,
years I carried that.
The reason I took the 6 ARC was because I'd been carrying my 300 short mag, and I started with Barnes, and then I switched to hammers. I was shooting the 168 HHT at 3150. And yeah, you talk about just flattening deer. There was no question if that deer was dead if I hit it, and which was great. But also, I was like, I could make this, like, sure, it's a slightly, I guess, a little bit more of a challenge. I actually have to hit it in the kill zone now with the 6 ARC, but and honestly, it was more fun.
Yeah.
I mean, down in the southern states, we've got a lot of guys that hunt down there with 22 cals. Tons of them. It's very common there, and they hunt their deer with 22 centerfires. 223 and up, and our bullets are very effective. The first 22 cal we designed was the little 44 grain Hammer Hunter. And that runs in the old factory 12, 14 twist rifles. And the 22 250 runs them at 4,200 feet per second. And we designed that bullet. We went to the range and shot it, and zeroed the rifle at 200 yards. It shot great. It was hunting season, so we went out and shot a couple does with it at 300 yards. Now, granted, here I'm just like you guys and like many guys. That's not big enough to kill a deer. And so I'm, in all honesty, a little fearful of how this is going to go. And shot the first one at 300 yards. It killed it like it was struck by lightning. It was like, holy cow. Shot one the next day with the exact same results. And it was like, and again, 300-ish yards. And it was like, holy crap. These things are spectacular. And so that was kind of the beginning of the point when we're like, oh, geez, how small can we go? You know, how much can we play this speed kills game? And I mean, I took a 17 Hornet to Africa and shot Impala with it. Uh, and it worked with our little 21 grain Hammer Hunter, and it was spectacular. I'm, and I think I said it earlier. I'm not advocating to get a 17 Hornet to go out and kill deer with, but with a well constructed, well designed bullet, it works well. Uh, but again, I don't I fully believe I don't think you can take too big of a gun, but I think you can take one that's too small.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it, and the subsonic world that Mariah wants to go jump into. I don't understand it, but it's a big market, and we're now just starting the beginning of looking into designing a sub bullet. And well, we our first design, we went and shot a deer with it this winter, this fall, and Brian's son, he was kind of the push. I want to shoot one with a sub, so he went and climbed in his tree stand and he shot a doe with 308 Win running. I don't remember. I think the bullet we designed was like 170 grains, shooting at subsonic. And Brian told him, if you're going to do it, you better be ready to track it. And by golly, if he didn't shoot that deer and she was dead in 20 yards, and a much larger hole through the vitals than I expected to see. So I guess it works.
I mean, if a whitetail only goes 20 yards, then a blacktail is going to go about 2 feet. So
Right,
I think we're good.
So that's it. That's our sample size of one with what we're working with a sub.
I want to shoot a bear with one this spring. So
we need to design one of these for you in a 338 so you can go kill stuff with it.
Well, the great thing about an AR is I can just keep pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
when I get to hear the horror stories, but I mean, the subsonic world does turn into long tracking efforts sometimes. And so I think a guy needs to be prepared to do that. A bullet going 1,000 feet or 800 feet per second on impact, it's going to go through them. But is it stunning? No, it's not stunning like hitting them 3,000 feet per second. It can't be. But golly, we killed a lot of animals with round balls out of muskets for a long time. So it certainly works. And it'll do it. But I think guys need to learn and realize their limitations with the weapon.
I kind of look at it from the bow hunting perspective. It's very similar, I think, and shot placement matters.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, it's so much more than like if I was shooting any supersonic 30 cal.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm doing my best to make the best a shot as I can, but if I'm in the vicinity of the heart and the lungs, that's a dead animal.
Right.
With a bow, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And with a subsonic, it's going to be absolutely the same way.
Yeah.
I'd say your window of opportunity is probably smaller. With the sub. But I don't know. I think we're going to go after the sub world a little differently than the other stuff. I don't think we're going to try and make a bullet that is an expanding bullet. I think we're going to stay in line with what we've done with like our pistol bullets. All pretty much already in their terminal form. It's a very good design, and it makes a big wound channel. We don't have to worry about if the bullet did or didn't open properly at the low velocities. It's already in its terminal form, and I think that's what we're going to wind up doing.
Think that has some kind of a hydraulic effect within the animal then?
It's like the old hard cast wad cutter flat front bullets, right? Out of the old 4570s or whatever, the old lever guns, they're very well proven killers. That big flat front area, which same principle as what we do with our high velocity stuff. We want to get rid of the nose and turn it into that flat square front retained shank. And it works very well. So we're going to stick with that principle that we've started with, having that flat square front projectile that's going to straight line penetrate.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I want. I don't really think the super, I might make somebody mad, but I don't really think the super fast twist with a bullet that just completely opens up because of the spin is really a great idea myself, especially on an animal. Like, there's just too much that can change and go wrong with that. That's what I think anyway.
And yeah, I don't know. It's a different philosophy, I guess, and I know that, the bullets that open to make the big fan shape, whatever you want to say, if it's spinning too much, that's problematic for them. So there's that moment of too much twist or not enough twist. And I think with what we want to go with, there's again going to be no such thing as too much twist. And we still have to figure out the whole subsonic ballistic stability and twist rate thing. This bullet that we did this fall, it's terminally very stable, but it's not accurate past 50 yards. It just opens up too much. So I think but that was a conventional twist. I think we've probably got to, if we get that twist really fast, which then I think we can bring that accuracy into where we want to see it.
The subsonic cartridges are coming in a pretty high twist, so
faster and faster, and with the 8.6 blackout running the 3-inch twist, we've got a lot of guys shooting our 186 grain stone hammers at supersonic out of it with very good results. Running those things at 2,500 feet per second or something like that, and the 3 twist. And so, so far we've not been able to find a limit of too much twist. And one of these days I'm going to find somebody that can make me a 1-to-1 twist. So I want to see if I can make a bullet fail in the twist.
They just do your rifling with a drill bit.
Right, yeah.
So Mariah, we'll get you some subs for that, and you can go kill everything you can find that walks in Alaska.
That's kind of the plan, honestly.
Yeah.
Get some views on YouTube. Do something different.
I have a bait that's set up on the ground to shoot from. That's got nothing but black bears. That you and I might have to go sit to do that with, because it's a
shoot him first, Dalton. He'll follow you up.
Yeah, well, yeah. As it so happens, I can follow him up all right.
Oh, that's the original assault rifle.
Ringtail roarer from the Thunder and Lightning country.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else to add, Steve, before we wrap it up here?
So I enjoyed it, guys. Glad to get with you again. It was fun.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Folks, if you'd like to do a little more homework or purchase any of these projectiles of which we so highly speak, you can head over to hammerbullets.com And even through the shortcomings of bullet supplies during COVID, Hammer somehow managed to continue to provide a consistent production of bullets. So they are most often in stock from what we have seen over the years working with them. Mo and I have been working with Steve over there at Hammer for a good few years now, and obviously he's been a supporter of this podcast since the beginning, and a good partner to work with. And we don't like to work with anybody that we don't actually use their stuff in the field. And Mo and I combined have shot a whole lot of animals over the last 2 or 3 years with Hammer bullets. Actually, closer to 3 or 4 now. And I've had clients guiding that have shot hammers multiple times now. They've showed up and had Hammer bullets, and we've been able to talk about that. And it's always been with good results. So if you'd like to get some Hammer bullets, head on over to their website and check them out. If you like the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, we ask that you leave us a 5-star rating or a positive written review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Thank you, Steve, for joining us this week for this episode. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll have to stay in touch and keep the listeners updated as we come to terms with some new things to play with for this upcoming spring that we are very ready for at this point. I mean, it's only January, but I'm already thinking about bear bait now as we speak. So, thanks for joining us, Steve. And folks, we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of the podcast. Until then, tread lightly, but don't tread well.